Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Storyline English. It's so good to have you here. Let's take a breath together. Now, imagine for a moment you are standing on a cold hill in Europe. The wind is quiet, the sky is gray, and in front of you, a young man looks out at the world. He is not tall. He does not look powerful, but inside his mind, something is burning. A fire, a dream, a question that will change history forever. Who is this man? And how did a boy from a small island become one of the most famous people who ever lived? Stay with me, because today, we are going to travel back in time together. We are going to listen to one of the greatest stories in all of human history. This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte, and it begins on a small, quiet island, far from the power, far from the glory, but full of something important, full of hunger, full of purpose. Are you ready? Then let us begin. The year was 1769. On a small island called Corsica in the Mediterranean Sea, a baby boy was born. His name was Napoleone Bonaparte. Corsica was not a rich or powerful place. It was a small island, far from the great cities of Europe. The people there were proud, but they were simple. They lived simple lives. And this baby boy, this small and quiet child, was born into a family that was not very wealthy. His father, Carlo, was a lawyer. His mother, Letizia, was a strong and serious woman. She raised her children with discipline. She taught them to work hard. She taught them that life is not easy and that you must fight for everything you want. Napoleon was the second of 8 children. Life in the family home was busy and sometimes difficult. But young Napoleon was different from the other children. He was serious. He was focused. And from a very young age, he loved to read. He read books about great leaders. He read about wars and battles and history. He was quiet, but his mind was always moving, always thinking, always dreaming. And then, when Napoleon was just 9 years old, something happened that would change everything. His father made a very important decision, and that decision would send young Napoleon far, far away from his island home. But where was he going? And what would he find there? When Napoleon was 9 years old, his father sent him to France, to a school for soldiers, a military school. For a young boy from a small island, this was a big journey. France was a powerful country, a rich country, full of noise and history and culture. But for Napoleon, it was also a lonely place. He was different from the other boys. He spoke French with a strong Corsican accent. The other boys laughed at him. They called him names. They said he was not really French. He was an outsider. And Napoleon felt this deeply. But he did not cry. He did not give up. Instead, he studied harder. He became very good at mathematics. He loved geography and history. He read everything he could find. And slowly, something began to grow inside him. Not just knowledge, but confidence. A quiet, strong confidence. He began to feel that he was not less than the other boys. He was different. And different, he believed, was something special, He was not the most popular boy at school, but he was one of the most focused, one of the most serious. And when he graduated from the military school in Paris at the age of 16, he was ready to become a soldier, ready to begin his journey. But the world he was stepping into was about to become very dangerous. France was changing, and the change was coming fast. It was the late 1780s. France was in trouble. The poor people of France were very angry. They had no food, they had no money, and the king and the rich people lived in beautiful palaces and ate wonderful food. The people said, "This is not fair." And in 1789, the French Revolution began. It was a time of great change and also great danger. People were angry. Cities were loud with noise and fear. The old world was falling apart. And in this chaos, a young soldier named Napoleon began to rise. He was brave, he was smart, and he understood something very important. He understood that in times of change, the people who act quickly and think clearly are the ones who win. Napoleon fought in several battles and showed great skill. He was not afraid. He made fast decisions. He inspired the soldiers around him, and people began to notice him. At the age of 24, he became a general. A general at 24 years old. This was remarkable. This was extraordinary. The lonely boy from Corsica, the outsider who was laughed at in school, was now one of the most important military leaders in France. But Napoleon did not stop there. No, because for Napoleon, becoming a general was only the beginning. The real question was this: how far can one person go? And Napoleon, it seemed, was not finished asking that question. The years passed. Napoleon won battle after battle. He fought in Italy. He fought in Egypt. He became a hero to the French people. They loved him. They trusted him. And in 1799, Napoleon made a bold and dangerous move. He took control of the French government. It was not a normal election. It was fast. It was calculated. And it worked. Napoleon became the leader of France. And then, just a few years later, in 1804, something happened that nobody in history had seen for a very long time. In a beautiful ceremony in the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, Napoleon took a crown, and he placed it on his own head. He did not wait for someone else to crown him. He crowned himself. He was now Napoleon I, Emperor of France. The room was full of powerful people, generals, politicians, kings and queens from other countries. But Napoleon looked at no one. He looked forward. Because for Napoleon, this was not an ending. This was not the top of the mountain. This was just another beginning. An empire now stood behind him, and he believed the whole world was waiting ahead. But power, as many people in history have learned, is a difficult thing to hold, and the higher you rise, the harder the fall can be. Napoleon controlled most of Europe. He changed laws. He created systems that still exist today. He built roads and schools. He brought order to a continent that had been in chaos for years. Many people respected him. Some people feared him. But Napoleon was never satisfied. He always wanted more. and in 1812 he made the greatest mistake of his life. He decided to invade Russia. Russia was a massive country, cold, vast, and very, very difficult to fight in. Napoleon took an army of more than 600,000 soldiers east into Russia. It was the largest army in the history of Europe at that time. At first, the Russian army moved back. They did not fight directly. They pulled back. And as they moved, they burned their own villages. They burned the food. They left nothing for Napoleon's army. Napoleon reached Moscow, but Moscow was empty. And then winter came. The Russian winter. Cold beyond imagination. Soldiers died not from battle, but from the cold, from hunger, from exhaustion. Napoleon had to retreat, and that retreat became one of the saddest events in military history. More than half of his army did not return. Napoleon had won so many battles, but Russia broke something inside his empire. And his enemies, watching from the edges of Europe, began to see that this man was not invincible. The Great Wall was beginning to crack. After the disaster in Russia, things moved quickly. The countries of Europe joined together against Napoleon. England, Prussia, Austria, Russia, they all wanted him gone. Napoleon fought back. He was still brilliant, still brave, but he was tired, and his army was weakened. In 1814, the enemies entered Paris. Napoleon, for the first time in his life, had no choice. He gave up power. He was sent away to a small island called Elba in the Mediterranean Sea. Not so different, perhaps, from the island where he was born. But Napoleon was not a man who rested for long. Just 10 months later, he escaped from Elba. He returned to France, and the French people welcomed him back. Soldiers who were sent to stop him joined him instead. It seemed, for a brief and shining moment, that the story might continue. But it did not. In June 1815, at a place called Waterloo in Belgium, Napoleon fought his final battle. The English General Wellington and his allies were too strong. Napoleon lost. And this time, there was no escape. He was sent far away, to a tiny remote island in the South Atlantic Ocean called St. Helena. He would never leave that island. He lived there for 6 years, quiet and alone. And in 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte died. He was 51 years old. The boy from Corsica, the outsider, the general, the emperor, gone. And so, my friends, the story of Napoleon Bonaparte comes to a quiet end. But what does it leave us with? What can we learn from this remarkable and complicated life? Napoleon was not a perfect man. He made terrible mistakes. He caused great suffering. Wars are never simple, and the story of Napoleon is full of pain as well as greatness. But there is something in his journey that speaks to all of us. He was an outsider. He was laughed at. He spoke with the wrong accent. He came from the wrong place. And yet, he refused to accept that the world had already decided his future. He studied. He worked. He believed that knowledge and effort could change a life. And they did. Not perfectly, not without cost, but powerfully. And here you are, my friend. You are listening to this story in English. Maybe English is not your first language. Maybe sometimes it feels difficult. Maybe sometimes you feel like an outsider too. But you are here. You are learning. You are on your own journey of discovery. And that is something to be proud of. Every story you listen to, every word you understand, every sentence that becomes a little clearer is a small victory. Keep going. Keep listening. Keep learning. This is Storyline English. And if this story moved you, if it helped you learn something today, please come back. There are many more journeys waiting for you here. Leave a comment and tell me, what did you feel during Napoleon's story? I would love to hear your voice. Until next time, my friends, take care of yourselves and never stop learning.